when I discovered my own family had been systematically destroying my professional reputation through fake social media accounts for 3 years. I thought my career was over. But what they didn't know was that the social media manager they hired to help cover their tracks was my husband. And he'd been documenting everything. By the time I was done, they weren't just exposed. They lost everything they'd built, and I became the CEO of the company they tried to steal from me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Chloe Brennan, and 3 months ago, I was convinced I was losing my mind. Clients were canceling contracts without explanation. Potential partnerships were falling through at the last minute, and my professional reputation was crumbling faster than I could rebuild it. I'd wake up each morning with a knot in my stomach, checking my phone for the latest disaster, wondering what I'd done wrong this time. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in Austin. The Texas sun was already blazing at 7 a.m., casting long shadows across the glass facade of our downtown office building. I pulled into the parking garage of Brennan Creative Solutions, the digital marketing firm my father David had built from nothing 30 years ago. The company that was supposed to be my legacy, the one I'd poured my heart into since graduating from UT with a degree in communications and a head full of dreams. I should have been excited that morning. After 6 months of brutal negotiations, we were finally presenting our biggest pitch of the year to Cloud Vault Technologies, a startup that was revolutionizing data storage. The contract was worth $2 million, enough to expand our Austin operations and maybe even open that satellite office in Dallas I'd been pushing for. But as I rode the elevator to the 15th floor, my hands were shaking. The elevator doors opened to reveal our sleek reception area, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, very Austin chic. Our receptionist Kelly Rodriguez looked up from her computer with a sympathetic smile that immediately made my stomach drop. That was never a good sign. "Morning, Chloe. Your dad wants to see you in the conference room before the presentation." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral even though my pulse quickened. Family meetings before big presentations were rarely good news, especially lately. I walked past the open workspace where our team of designers and strategists were already hunched over their monitors, past the wall of awards, and featured articles that chronicled our company's rise to prominence in the competitive Austin tech scene. The conference room was at the end of the hall, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of Lady Bird Lake and the South Austin Hills beyond. My father David sat at the head of the mahogany table, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. He wore his lucky navy suit, the one he always donned for important client meetings. My mother Patricia sat to his right, tablet in hand, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look more like a corporate attorney than a marketing executive. My sister Natalie occupied the chair across from her, scrolling through her phone with the casual indifference she'd perfected since joining the company 2 years ago. "Close the door, honey," my father said without looking up from the documents spread in front of him. His voice carried that carefully controlled tone I'd learned to fear over the years. I settled into the chair at the opposite end of the table, as far from the family triangle as possible. "Is everything okay?" I thought we were all set for the Cloud Vault presentation. Patricia finally looked up from her tablet, her green eyes cold and calculating. "We need to discuss some concerns that have come to light regarding your professional conduct." The words hit me like ice water. My professional conduct? David leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him. "Chloe, we've received some troubling information about your online presence. Comments, posts, interactions that don't align with our company values." I felt my face flush hot. "What are you talking about? I'm extremely careful about my social media. You know that." Natalie finally looked up from her phone, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Are you, though? Because there's some pretty unprofessional stuff out there with your name on it." "Show me." The words came out sharper than I intended. Patricia slid her tablet across the table. On the screen was a Twitter account with my name and a professional headshot I recognized from our company website. But the bio was wrong, listing me as a senior marketing consultant instead of senior brand strategist. And the tweets, My God, the tweets. These companies need to stop expecting miracles from their marketing teams when they won't invest in proper strategies. Some clients are literally impossible to work with. Just had to deal with another delusional startup founder who thinks their product will change the world. Reality check. It won't. The Austin tech scene is so oversaturated. Half these companies are just waiting to fail. I scrolled through months of increasingly bitter and unprofessional posts, each one more damaging than the last. Comments about specific clients, complaints about the Austin business community, sarcastic observations about industry trends that made me sound cynical and difficult to work with. This isn't me. My voice came out as barely a whisper. I didn't write any of this. The account is linked to your email address, David said quietly. It's been active for almost 3 years. Dad, I'm telling you, I didn't create this account. Someone else did this. Someone is impersonating me. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the distant hum of traffic from Cesar Chavez Street below, the soft whir of the air conditioning, the subtle buzz of fluorescent lights. But from my family, nothing. Finally, Patricia spoke. Chloe, we understand you've been under a lot of pressure lately. The competition for clients has been intense, and we know you've been working long hours. I didn't write these tweets. The words exploded out of me, louder than I intended. Someone is sabotaging me, and instead of helping me figure out who, you're sitting here acting like I'm having some kind of breakdown. David's expression hardened. Lower your voice. This kind of defensive reaction is exactly what we're concerned about. I stared at him, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Defensive reaction? Dad, someone is destroying my reputation, and my own family is acting like I'm the problem. Natalie leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. Chloe, maybe you should consider taking some time off. Get your head straight. We can handle your clients while you figure things out. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. My clients? Natalie, I've been managing the Cloud Vault account for 8 months. I know every detail of their business model, their target demographics, their growth projections. And look how that's working out, Patricia interrupted. 3 other companies have backed out of negotiations with us in the past month. The Austin Business Journal is asking questions about our company culture. We're starting to develop a reputation problem. I felt the walls of the conference room closing in around me. So you're blaming me for that too? We're not blaming you, David said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that had driven me crazy since childhood. We're trying to protect you. And protect the company. Sometimes family businesses require difficult decisions. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I'd heard variations of it my entire life, whenever my parents wanted to override my input or exclude me from important decisions. Family business, family loyalty, family first. But somehow, I always seemed to be the one asked to sacrifice for the good of the family. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though I was starting to suspect I already knew. Patricia and David exchanged a look, one of those wordless communications that long-married couples perfect over decades. David cleared his throat. We think it would be best if you stepped back from client-facing responsibilities for a while. Let Natalie take the lead on Cloud Vault and the other major accounts while you focus on internal projects. Blog posts, social media strategy, research and development. You're demoting me. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. We're repositioning you, Patricia corrected. Giving you space to rebuild your professional image while keeping you involved in the company. I looked around the table at the 3 people who were supposed to have my back no matter what. My father, who had taught me everything I knew about marketing and brand strategy. My mother, who had been my mentor when I first joined the company. My sister, who I'd defended countless times when our parents criticized her work ethic. They were looking at me like I was a problem to be managed, not a family member to be supported. I want to see the other accounts, I said quietly. The fake Twitter account. If someone is impersonating me, there have to be other profiles. Chloe, David started. Show me everything. Another tablet appeared, this one containing screenshots of a LinkedIn profile that looked almost identical to my real one, except for subtle differences in the work history and recommendations. The posts were more professionally worded than the Twitter content, but equally damaging. Comments about how difficult it was to work with small businesses, complaints about unrealistic client expectations, observations about the Austin startup scene that painted me as arrogant and out of touch. Then came the Instagram account. Same profile photo, but filled with pictures I'd never posted. Images of expensive restaurants with captions about client dinners. Photos of luxury cars with comments about finally being able to afford the lifestyle I deserve. Screenshots of emails between me and fictional clients, complaining about their budgets and timelines. The Facebook profile was the worst. It portrayed me as someone who looked down on small businesses and indie startups, the very clients who had built our company's reputation. There were posts about how exhausting it was to explain basic marketing concepts to entrepreneurs who clearly had no business starting a company.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Each profile was a masterpiece of character assassination, designed to make me look unprofessional, arrogant, and difficult to work with. And they'd been active for years, slowly building a narrative that I was someone you wouldn't want to hire for your marketing needs. Who found these? I asked. Connor Hayes reached out to us last week, Patricia said. Connor was our longtime business partner, who ran a complimentary web development firm. He said a potential client had sent him these profiles asking if we were the kind of company they wanted to work with. My heart sank. Connor and I had been friends since college. If he was seeing this content and feeling the need to warn my parents, the damage was already widespread in our professional community. But why would someone do this? I asked. Who would spend this much time and effort trying to destroy my reputation? The silence stretched on until Natalie finally spoke up. Maybe you should ask yourself who might have a grudge against you, or against the company. There was something in her tone, a slight smugness that made my skin crawl. But before I could process it fully, David was standing up. The important thing now is damage control, he said. We need to focus on the Cloud Vault presentation and make sure we don't lose this contract. Natalie will take the lead, with support from you and Patricia. Dad, I've been working on this account for months. I know their business better than anyone, which is exactly why your input will be valuable in a supporting role, he said firmly. But given the current situation, I think it's best if Natalie is the primary point of contact going forward. I watched as my biggest professional opportunity was handed to my sister, who had spent the last 2 years coasting on the family name while I worked 60-hour weeks, trying to prove myself worthy of eventually taking over the company. This is temporary, right? I asked. Once we figure out who's behind the fake profiles and get them taken down. Of course, Patricia said quickly. But these things take time to resolve. And reputation damage can linger for years if it's not handled properly. The implication was clear. I was being sidelined indefinitely, and my own family was acting like it was for my own good. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. I'm going to get some air before the presentation. Chloe, David called as I reached the door. I know this is difficult, but we're family. We're gonna get through this together. I turned back to look at him, this man who had been my hero growing up, who had taught me that success in business came from hard work and integrity. Are we, Dad? Because right now it feels like I'm the only one who thinks someone is trying to hurt me, and you three are acting like I'm the threat. I left the conference room before any of them could respond, walking quickly past the curious glances of my coworkers. I needed space to think, to process what had just happened, to figure out my next move. But as I waited for the elevator, one thought kept echoing in my mind. Someone had spent years building an elaborate campaign to destroy my professional reputation. Someone who knew enough about my work and my schedule to make the fake profiles convincing. Someone who had access to professional photos and inside information about our clients. Someone who wanted me out of the picture badly enough to commit what amounted to identity theft and fraud. And my own family's first instinct wasn't to help me find out who it was. It was to assume I was the problem. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, watching the numbers count down as I descended toward the parking garage. By the time I reached my car, one thing had become crystal clear. If I was going to figure out who was behind this attack, I was going to have to do it alone. What I didn't know yet was that the person I trusted most in the world was about to hand me the key to everything. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my Honda Civic in the parking lot of Radio Coffee on Barton Springs Road, trying to calm my racing thoughts with an iced oat milk latte that I couldn't actually taste. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with texts from my husband Marcus, who was probably wondering why I wasn't responding to his usual good morning messages. Marcus worked from home as a freelance social media manager, helping small businesses and nonprofits build their online presence. He was good at it too, with an intuitive understanding of algorithms and audience engagement that I sometimes envied. While I focused on big-picture brand strategy, he was the one who could make a post go viral or turn a struggling Instagram account into a lead generation machine. I finally opened his messages. "How's the big day going? Ready to knock CloudVault socks off? Hope you grabbed coffee. I know you were too nervous to eat breakfast. Call me when you get a chance. Love you." The casual normalcy of his texts felt jarring after the morning I'd just had. I realized I had no idea how to even begin explaining what had happened. "Hey honey, my family thinks I've been secretly running fake social media accounts that make me look like a terrible person, and they've basically demoted me from my own career." Instead, I typed back, "Rough morning. We'll call you after the presentation. Love you too." His response was immediate. "Everything okay? You sound stressed." I stared at the words for a long moment. Marcus knew me well enough to read my mood through text messages. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 2, and he was probably the only person in my life who would immediately believe that I hadn't created those fake profiles. But sitting in that parking lot, watching other people go about their normal Tuesday routines, I felt more alone than I had in years. Someone was systematically destroying everything I'd worked for, and the people who should have been my allies were treating me like I was the enemy. I was about to find out that the truth was more complicated than I could have ever imagined, and that sometimes the person you trust most in the world is the only one standing between you and complete destruction. The CloudVault presentation was a disaster, though not for the reasons I expected. Natalie had clearly spent the weekend cramming my months of research, but she fumbled basic questions about user demographics and stumbled through the competitive analysis I'd crafted specifically for their industry vertical. I watched from my designated corner seat as $2 million in potential revenue slipped through our fingers, because my sister couldn't explain why CloudVault's target market would respond better to educational content than promotional messaging. The CEO of CloudVault, a sharp woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, kept glancing in my direction during Natalie's presentation. I could see the confusion in her eyes. She'd been working with me for months, building a relationship based on my deep understanding of her company's unique position in the data storage market. Now suddenly my sister was presenting my strategies as if she'd developed them herself, missing crucial nuances that I'd spent weeks perfecting. When Dr. Chen asked about the integration timeline for their product launch campaign, Natalie actually looked at me for help. The moment stretched uncomfortably long before Patricia jumped in, with a generic response that completely missed the specific technical constraints we'd discussed in previous meetings. After CloudVault's team left with polite promises to, quote, "review our proposal and get back to us," the conference room fell silent. I knew we wouldn't hear from them again. You don't recover from a presentation that poorly executed, especially when you're competing against 3 other Austin agencies who actually knew what they were talking about. David loosened his tie and sank into his chair. "That didn't go as planned." "It went exactly as I warned you it would," I said quietly. Natalie doesn't know their business model well enough to answer detailed questions. "I did fine," Natalie snapped. "Maybe if you'd prepared me better instead of sulking. I gave you 18 pages of notes and offered to walk you through every slide." I interrupted. "You said you didn't need my help because the presentation was self-explanatory." Patricia held up a hand. "What's done is done. We need to focus on moving forward." Moving forward. As if we hadn't just lost the biggest potential contract in our company's history because they'd benched their most knowledgeable team member based on fake social media profiles. I left the office early that afternoon, claiming I needed to work on damage control for our remaining clients. Really, I just couldn't stand to be in that building anymore, surrounded by people who looked at me like I was a liability, instead of the person who'd been carrying half our client load for the past 3 years. The drive home to our duplex in East Austin gave me time to think. Marcus and I had bought the place 2 years ago, a 1940s house that we'd slowly been renovating room by room. It was modest compared to my parents' sprawling property in Westlake, but it was ours. The mortgage was in both our names, the garden in the backyard was something we'd planted together, and the mismatched furniture reflected our combined tastes rather than some designer's vision of what successful people should own. I found Marcus in his home office, a converted bedroom overlooking our neighbor's chicken coop. He had 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle around his desk, each displaying different social media dashboards. As a freelance social media manager, he juggled about 15 clients at any given time, everything from local restaurants to nonprofit organizations to small tech startups that couldn't afford to hire their own marketing teams. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, immediately reading the exhaustion on my face. That bad? I slumped into the reading chair we'd squeezed into the corner of his office. Worse. They pulled me from the Cloud Vault presentation and let Natalie take the lead. She bombed it completely. Marcus spun his chair around to face me fully. Wait, what? Why would they do that? For the first time since the morning's conference room ambush, I felt like someone was actually listening to me. Marcus had this way of giving you his complete attention when you needed it, shutting out all distractions and focusing entirely on what you were saying. It was probably part of what made him so good at his job. Understanding people's needs and motivations was essential when you were trying to build their online presence. Someone has been impersonating me on social media, I said. Multiple platforms, fake profiles that look exactly like me but filled with unprofessional posts and comments. My family thinks it's affecting our company's reputation, so they've decided to sideline me until the situation gets resolved. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his expression shifting from confusion to concern to something I couldn't quite identify. "Show me," he said finally. I pulled out my phone and started showing him the screenshots Patricia had shared that morning. He studied each image carefully, occasionally asking me to scroll back up or zoom in on particular details. His face grew increasingly grim as we went through the fake Twitter account, the LinkedIn profile, the Instagram posts that made me look like an entitled narcissist. "Chloe," he said slowly, "this is really sophisticated work. Whoever did this knows your industry well enough to create believable content. They have access to professional photos of you. They understand your writing style well enough to create posts that sound like they could be from you, just with a different attitude. I know. That's what makes it so scary. It has to be someone who knows me personally, right? Someone who's been watching my career closely enough to mimic my voice." Marcus was still staring at my phone screen, but something in his posture had changed. He seemed tense, almost guilty. "Have you reported these accounts to the platforms? Identity theft and impersonation violate all their terms of service." "I tried this afternoon, but the reporting process is complicated. They want documentation proving that I'm the real person, and some of these accounts have been active for years. They have followers, engagement history, conversations with other users. It's going to take weeks to get them taken down, if I can manage it at all." "Years?" Marcus looked up sharply. "These have been running for years?" "According to my parents, some of them date back almost 3 years. Can you imagine someone holding a grudge that long? Putting in that much effort to systematically destroy my reputation?" Marcus was quiet again, turning back to his computer monitors. I watched as he pulled up what looked like a social media monitoring dashboard, typing rapidly. "I'm running your name through some professional tools," he explained. "If there are fake profiles out there, this should help us find all of them, not just the ones your family showed you. You can do that? It's part of what I do for clients. Reputation monitoring. Identifying fake accounts that might be trying to impersonate their brands. The software scans for similar usernames, profile photos, biographical information." I felt a surge of hope for the first time all day. "Marcus, you're brilliant. Why didn't I think of asking you to help with this earlier?" He didn't answer immediately, focused on the data flowing across his screens. After a few minutes, he turned back to me with an expression I'd never seen before. He looked sick. "Chloe, we need to talk." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "What did you find?" "I found all of them. Every fake profile. And I found the IP addresses they were created from. The login patterns. The device signatures." He paused, running his hands through his dark hair. "I know who's been doing this to you." I leaned forward in my chair. "Who?" Marcus was staring at his hands instead of looking at me. "Your family hired me." The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, but my brain couldn't process what he was telling me. "What do you mean, they hired you?" 3 years ago, your mother reached out to me through my professional website. She said the family business needed help with social media strategy and reputation management. She offered me a generous monthly retainer to handle various online projects. I felt like the room was spinning. "Marcus, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm the social media manager your family hired. I'm the one who created those profiles." The world seemed to tilt sideways. My husband, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world, was telling me that he had spent 3 years systematically destroying my professional reputation. For money. From my own family. "You?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Chloe, you have to understand, I didn't know it was you at first. Your mother hired me under a consulting agreement with specific instructions about what kind of content to create. She said they were conducting market research, studying how negative social media presence affects professional opportunities in the marketing industry." I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. Market research. She provided me with photos, biographical information, writing samples. She said they were creating test personas to study online reputation management. I thought I was helping with legitimate business research. For 3 years? Marcus's voice was getting smaller. "When I figured out what was really happening, when I realized the person in the photos was you, I tried to stop. But your mother said the research was too important to abandon. She increased my fee and asked me to continue monitoring and updating the profiles. I felt like I was going to be sick. You knew it was me, and you kept doing it." "I documented everything," he said quickly. "Every instruction they gave me, every post they asked me to create, every interaction they wanted me to have with other users. I've been keeping records because I knew something wasn't right about the project." "You've been keeping records." I repeated his words slowly, trying to understand. "Marcus, this has been destroying my career. I just lost a $2 million contract because of those fake profiles. My own family demoted me this morning because they think I'm a liability to the company. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth months ago when I first suspected what was really happening." I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked our backyard. Everything I thought I knew about my life was crumbling around me. My family had been sabotaging me for years. My husband had been helping them. The 2 groups of people I trusted most in the world had been working together to destroy everything I'd built. "Why?" I asked without turning around. "Why would they want to hurt me like this?" "I don't think they meant for it to go this far," Marcus said quietly. "Your mother's original instructions were more subtle. Professional but slightly critical posts. Nothing obviously damaging. But over time, the content got more negative. More personal. Like they were escalating the campaign. Escalating toward what? I think they wanted you to quit." I turned to face him. "Quit my own family's company? Think about it, Chloe. If you left Brennan Creative Solutions voluntarily, Natalie would be positioned to take over when your parents retire. No messy succession planning. No questions about why the older daughter wasn't chosen to lead the company. The pieces were starting to fall into place, creating a picture so ugly I didn't want to believe it. They couldn't just fire me because I'm family, but if they made my working environment miserable enough, if they convinced me that I was damaging the company's reputation. You might decide to leave on your own," Marcus finished. "And they'd look like the victims of a difficult family situation, instead of the architects of it." I sank back into the reading chair, feeling like all the energy had drained out of my body. "How could you help them do this to me?" "I thought I was protecting you," he said desperately. Once I realized what was happening, I started documenting everything instead of just following their instructions. I have 3 years of evidence showing that this was a coordinated campaign to damage your reputation. Screenshots, email conversations, payment records, detailed logs of every post I created and when. You thought you were protecting me by continuing to destroy my career. I thought I was gathering evidence to expose them. If I had stopped too suddenly, they might have found someone else to continue the work, someone who wouldn't have kept records. At least this way I could control how far it went and document their involvement. I stared at my husband, this person I'd built a life with, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with what he was telling me. Marcus, they paid you to impersonate me online, to make me look unprofessional and difficult to work with. And you did it. For 3 years. I was trying to protect both of us, he said. The money they were paying me helped us buy this house, helped us build our life together. If I had exposed them too early, before I had enough evidence to prove what they were doing, they could have destroyed both our careers. So you chose to let them destroy mine instead. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the neighbors' chickens clucking in their coop, the distant hum of traffic on East Cesar Chavez, the tick of the antique clock we'd bought at the Round Top Antiques Fair during our first year of marriage. Normal sounds of the life we'd built together, now tainted by the knowledge that it had been funded by my family's betrayal. Show me, I said finally. Show me everything you've been documenting. Marcus hesitated. Chloe, some of it is going to be hard to see. Harder than finding out my husband and my family have been conspiring against me for 3 years? I doubt it. He turned back to his computer and opened a folder labeled Brennan Consulting Project. Inside were hundreds of files. Screenshots of social media posts, email conversations with my mother, detailed logs of every fake interaction he'd created, payment records showing monthly transfers from an account registered to Brennan Creative Solutions. The scope of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just the profiles my parents had shown me that morning. There were fake accounts on platforms I'd never even considered. Professional networking sites, industry forums, review platforms where I had left negative comments about competitors and potential partners. They had created an entire shadow version of me online, one that was bitter, unprofessional, and toxic to work with. And they'd been building this alternate reality for 3 years, slowly poisoning my reputation in the Austin business community one post at a time. Here, Marcus said, opening an email thread. This is from about 6 months ago, when your mother started pushing for more aggressive content. The email was from Patricia's personal account, not her work address. Marcus, we need to accelerate the timeline on this project. Chloe is getting too comfortable in her role, and we're concerned she might start making demands about succession planning. I need you to create some posts that show her discussing confidential client information. Nothing that could actually hurt the clients, but enough to raise questions about her judgment. I felt my hands clenching into fists. She asked you to make me look like I was violating client confidentiality? I didn't do it, Marcus said quickly. That was one of the lines I wouldn't cross. I told her it was too risky, that it could expose the whole operation if anyone investigated too closely. How generous of you. I kept reading through the email exchanges, watching the evolution of a conspiracy that had been designed to slowly strangle my career to death. Patricia's instructions became increasingly specific over time. She wanted posts that would alienate me from the Austin startup community. Content that would make me look out of touch with current marketing trends. Comments that would position me as someone who looked down on small businesses and independent entrepreneurs. It was a masterclass in character assassination, executed with the precision of a military campaign, and my own mother had been the general. There's more, Marcus said quietly. He opened another folder labeled Recording Files. You recorded conversations? Audio from video calls, yes. Your mother insisted on regular check-ins to review my work and plan future content. I started recording them when I realized how far this was going. He clicked on a file dated just 2 weeks ago. Patricia's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The Cloud Vault presentation is our opportunity to make this transition official. If Chloe's online reputation becomes a liability for that account specifically, David will have no choice but to remove her from client-facing roles permanently. Another voice joined the conversation. My father. Are you sure this is the right approach, Patricia? Maybe we should just have an honest conversation with her about the company's future. David, we've been over this. Chloe has never responded well to direct confrontation. She's too stubborn, too convinced that she deserves to inherit the business just because she's the older daughter. This way, she'll make the decision herself. And if she doesn't, if she fights to keep her position, then we'll have documentation showing that her online behavior is damaging our reputation. We'll have cause to remove her from the company entirely. My father was quiet for a moment. I still don't like deceiving her. Quote, David, this is about protecting everything we've built. Natalie understands the business side of things better than Chloe ever will. She doesn't get emotionally attached to clients or waste time on unprofitable projects. She's the right choice to lead this company into the future. Even if it means destroying Chloe's career, we're not destroying anything. We're simply making it clear that her talents might be better suited to a different environment. There are plenty of marketing firms in Austin where she could thrive without the pressure of family expectations. The recording ended, leaving Marcus and me sitting in silence. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside my chest and left me empty. My parents hadn't just been planning to sideline me temporarily. They had been orchestrating a campaign to force me out of the company entirely, to make room for my younger sister, who they apparently believed was better suited to carry on their legacy. And they'd been willing to destroy my professional reputation to do it. How many of these recordings do you have? I asked. Dozens. Every conversation I had with your mother, plus a few three-way calls that included your father and Natalie. Natalie knew, Marcus nodded grimly. She's been involved from the beginning. Actually, some of the ideas for specific posts came from her. She has insights into your personality and work style that helped make the fake profiles more believable. I thought about my sister's smirk that morning when she'd suggested I think about who might have a grudge against me. She'd been sitting there knowing exactly who was behind the sabotage because she'd helped plan it. I need to hear all of it, I said. Every recording, every email, every piece of evidence you have. Chloe, maybe we should take a break. Process what we've learned so far. No, my voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. I want to know exactly what they did and how they plan to get away with it. Because I'm going to make sure they don't. Marcus looked at me with something that might have been fear. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that they made a mistake when they hired you to help destroy me. Because now I have documentation of a conspiracy that goes way beyond social media impersonation. This is fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to damage my livelihood. And thanks to your recordings, I can prove all of it. Chloe, these are your parents, your sister, whatever you're planning. Whatever I'm planning? I stood up again, feeling energy returning to my body for the first time since that morning's meeting. Marcus, they've been planning this for 3 years. 3 years of systematically undermining my reputation, poisoning my relationships in the business community, setting me up to fail. And you helped them. I was trying to protect you. You were protecting yourself. The money they paid you helped us buy this house, helped us build our life together. You had a financial incentive to keep quiet about what they were doing. Marcus flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair, isn't it? You've been taking money from my family to destroy my career for 3 years, and you want to talk about what's fair? I walked to the doorway, then turned back to look at him. I'm going to expose all of this. The fake profiles, the conspiracy, the recordings, everything. And when I'm done, they're going to lose a lot more than just their reputation. Chloe, wait. We should think about this carefully. We? I shook my head. There is no we in this, Marcus. You chose your side 3 years ago, when you took their money and started destroying my life. Now you get to live with the consequences. I left him sitting in his office surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal and walked into our bedroom. I needed space to think, to plan, to figure out how to turn 3 years of documentation into justice. My family thought they had been clever, hiring my own husband to orchestrate my downfall. They probably figured that even if I discovered the fake profiles, I'd never suspect Marcus of being involved. Who would betray their spouse for money? But their cleverness had also been their downfall. By involving Marcus, by insisting on regular check-ins and detailed reports, by putting everything in writing, they had created a paper trail that would expose not just the social media impersonation, but the entire conspiracy behind it. I pulled out my phone and started making a list of everything I needed to do. Contact a lawyer who specialized in employment law and fraud cases. Document my financial losses from the contracts we'd lost due to my damaged reputation. Research the penalties for identity theft and conspiracy in Texas. Build a timeline showing how the fake profiles had directly impacted specific business opportunities. And then I was going to destroy them the same way they had tried to destroy me. Systematically. Methodically. With evidence so overwhelming that they wouldn't be able to deny what they'd done or minimize the damage they'd caused. They wanted to push me out of the family business? Fine. But when I was done with them, there wouldn't be a family business left for Natalie to inherit. The difference was, when I destroyed them, it would be with the truth. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop, 3 legal pads, and a pot of coffee that I'd brewed at midnight. Marcus had retreated to the guest bedroom after I'd made it clear that I needed space to process everything he'd revealed. The house felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that the life we'd built together had been subsidized by my family's betrayal. The documentation Marcus had shown me was extensive, but I needed to understand the full scope of what they'd done before I could figure out how to respond. I started by creating a timeline, marking every fake social media post, every email exchange, every payment transfer that had funded the destruction of my reputation. The pattern that emerged was more systematic than I'd initially realized. The campaign had started small. In the beginning, the fake profiles posted generic professional content that was slightly negative but not obviously damaging. Comments about challenging clients, observations about industry trends that painted me as moderately cynical but still professional. Someone scrolling through those early posts might have thought I was just having a bad week or dealing with difficult projects. But over the months, the tone had shifted. The posts became more personal, more bitter, more specifically targeted at the Austin business community that formed the backbone of our client base. By year 2, the fake version of me was regularly complaining about local startups, making snide comments about networking events, and positioning myself as someone who looked down on the collaborative culture that made Austin's tech scene unique. The escalation had been gradual enough that anyone discovering the profiles would assume I'd become increasingly disgruntled over time. It was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, designed to make my professional decline look like a natural progression rather than a coordinated attack. But the most damaging content had been posted in the last 6 months, coinciding with our pursuit of the Cloud Vault contract and other major accounts. Posts that made me look unstable, unprofessional, and actively hostile toward potential clients. The timing wasn't coincidental. My family had been preparing to justify my removal from client-facing roles by creating evidence that my attitude was becoming a liability. I pulled up the calendar from the past year and cross-referenced it with the fake social media activity. Every time I'd been excited about a new business opportunity, every time I'd mentioned working late on a promising pitch, every time I'd expressed optimism about our company's growth, there had been a corresponding surge in negative posts from the fake profiles. They had been using my own enthusiasm against me, turning my dedication to the business into evidence of my unsuitability to lead it. Around 3 a.m, I started digging deeper into the financial records Marcus had compiled. The payments from Brennan Creative Solutions to his consulting business had started at $5,000 per month, a substantial sum for what my mother had supposedly described as market research. But over time, the payments had increased. By the current year, Marcus was receiving $8,000 monthly, nearly $100,000 annually, to maintain and expand the fake profiles that were destroying my career. The scope of the financial commitment revealed how seriously my family had been taking this project. They hadn't just hired Marcus on a whim or as a temporary solution to some perceived problem. They had been investing significant money, month after month, year after year, in a long-term strategy to force me out of the company. I started calculating the professional opportunities I'd lost due to my damaged reputation. The Cloud Vault contract would have been worth $2 million in revenue, with my commission structure bringing me roughly $200,000 personally. But Cloud Vault wasn't the only opportunity that had disappeared in recent months. 3 other potential clients had backed out of negotiations without clear explanations. 2 networking opportunities I'd been excited about had resulted in polite but cool responses from organizers who might have seen the fake profiles. The total financial damage was approaching $500,000 in lost income, not counting the long-term impact on my career trajectory or the emotional toll of believing that my professional decline was somehow my own fault. But the money wasn't what hurt most. It was the betrayal of trust, the years of gaslighting, the way my family had smiled to my face while systematically undermining everything I'd worked to build. Every family dinner where they'd expressed concern about my stress levels. Every company meeting where they'd suggested I might be taking on too much responsibility. Every conversation where they'd hinted that maybe I needed to reconsider my career goals had been part of a calculated campaign to make me doubt my own competence. They had stolen more than my reputation. They had stolen my confidence, my sense of reality, my belief that I could trust my own perceptions about what was happening in my life. By dawn, I had filled all 3 legal pads with notes, timelines, and calculations. I had identified 17 different fake social media profiles across 8 platforms. I had documented financial losses totaling $473,000. I had created a detailed timeline showing how the fake posts correlated with specific business opportunities and family interactions. And I had decided that my family was going to pay for every single dollar they had cost me, plus damages for the emotional distress they had inflicted, plus punitive damages for the deliberate and malicious nature of their campaign. But first, I needed professional help. At 8 in the morning, I called the law office of Rodriguez, Kim & Associates, a firm that specialized in employment law and business fraud. I'd researched them online during my all-night investigation, reading through case studies of similar situations where employees had been targeted by coordinated reputation destruction campaigns. They had a track record of winning substantial settlements and weren't afraid to take on complex cases involving family businesses. The receptionist put me through to Elena Rodriguez, the founding partner, after I explained that I needed representation for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy charges against my own family's business. Ms. Brennan, Elena said after I'd given her a brief overview of the situation, "What you're describing sounds like a very serious case with multiple criminal and civil implications. I'd like to meet with you today, if possible, to review the evidence you've collected." "How soon can we meet?" "I had a cancellation this afternoon. Can you be here at 2 o'clock? I agreed immediately, then spent the morning organizing all of Marcus's documentation into a coherent presentation. I printed out key emails, created a summary timeline, and prepared a folder of evidence that would make the scope of the conspiracy impossible to deny. Marcus emerged from the guest bedroom around 10, looking like he hadn't slept either. We stared at each other across the kitchen, the weight of everything that had been revealed hanging between us like a wall. "How are you doing?" he asked quietly. "I'm preparing to destroy my family," I said without emotion. "How do you think I'm doing?" He winced. "Chloe, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But maybe we should think about whether going nuclear is really the best approach." "Nuclear?" I looked up from the documents I was organizing. "Marcus, they committed identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. They stole nearly $500,000 from me in lost opportunities. They paid you $100,000 over 3 years to systematically destroy my reputation. And you think I'm the one going nuclear? I just mean that once you file legal charges, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family will be permanently destroyed." My relationship with my family was destroyed 3 years ago when they decided to hire my husband to sabotage my career. I just didn't know it yet. Marcus sat down across from me at the kitchen table, studying the papers I'd spread out in neat piles. "This is a lot of evidence. It's enough to put them in prison. Chloe, your parents are in their 60s. Your sister has 2 young kids. Do you really want to be responsible for tearing apart their lives?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Do I want to be responsible?" "Marcus, they tore apart my life. They spent 3 years methodically destroying everything I'd worked to build, and they were planning to continue until I either quit or they had justification to fire me. They didn't care about tearing apart my life when it served their purposes. But they're still your family. No, they're not. The words came out harder than I'd intended. Family doesn't hire someone to impersonate you online. Family doesn't create fake evidence to justify pushing you out of your own inheritance. Family doesn't smile to your face while systematically poisoning your professional reputation behind your back. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What about us? What about our marriage? I had been dreading this conversation, but I knew it was inevitable. I don't know, Marcus. I don't know how to get past the fact that you took money to help destroy my career for 3 years. I don't know how to trust you again. I was trying to protect you. Once I realized what was happening, I started documenting everything so we'd have evidence to expose them. You were protecting yourself. The money they paid you helped us afford this house, helped us build the life we wanted. You had a financial incentive to keep quiet about what they were doing. That's not why I stayed involved, isn't it? Marcus, you were making nearly $100,000 a year from this project. That's almost as much as your entire legitimate business brings in. Are you telling me that didn't factor into your decision to keep quiet? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I'm meeting with a lawyer this afternoon, I said. I'm going to file both criminal and civil charges against my family and the company. I'm going to demand financial compensation for every dollar I lost due to their campaign. And I'm going to make sure that what they did becomes public knowledge so that other people don't have to go through what I've been through. What about the evidence I collected? Are you going to use my recordings and documentation? I had been thinking about this all night. Marcus's evidence was crucial to proving the conspiracy. But using it would mean relying on the testimony of someone who had been actively participating in the crime. I'm going to tell my lawyer about everything you documented and let her decide how to handle it. Whether that helps you or hurts you legally isn't my problem anymore. Chloe, please. I know I made mistakes, but I was trying to find a way to protect both of us. If I had exposed them too early, before I had enough evidence, they could have destroyed both our careers. They weren't destroying your career, Marcus. They were paying you to destroy mine. I stood up and started gathering my organized documents into a briefcase. The conversation was going in circles, and I had more important things to focus on than my husband's attempts to justify 3 years of betrayal. I'll be back this evening, I said. We can talk more then, but right now I need to concentrate on building a legal case that will hold up in court. The law office of Rodriguez, Kim and Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek building near the Texas state capitol, with windows offering a panoramic view of downtown Austin. Elena Rodriguez was a woman in her 40s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every type of story and wasn't easily shocked. She listened without interruption as I walked her through the timeline of events, the evidence Marcus had collected, and the financial losses I'd calculated. Occasionally, she would ask for clarification about specific details or request to see particular documents, but mostly she just took notes and let me tell the story from beginning to end. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a moment. Ms. Brennan, in 20 years of practicing law, I've seen a lot of employment disputes and family business conflicts, but I've never seen a case quite like this one. The level of premeditation and sophistication in this campaign is extraordinary. Is it winnable? Oh, it's very winnable. The question is how aggressively you want to pursue it and what your ultimate goals are. Do you want financial compensation? Do you want criminal charges filed? Do you want to take control of the family business? Do you want to destroy their reputation the way they destroyed yours? I thought about all the sleepless nights I'd spent wondering what I'd done wrong, all the self-doubt they'd instilled in me, all the opportunities I'd lost because of their systematic sabotage. I want all of it. Elena smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Then let's talk about strategy. Over the next 2 hours, she outlined a legal approach that was both comprehensive and devastating. We would file criminal charges for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. We would pursue civil damages for financial losses, emotional distress, and punitive damages. We would demand a forensic audit of the company's financial records to determine if any other illegal activities had been hidden. and we would seek an injunction that would prevent them from accessing or altering any digital evidence while the case was pending. The beauty of your husband's documentation, Elena explained, is that it creates an unbreakable chain of evidence. We have the fake profiles, the instructions from your family, the payment records, and the audio recordings of them discussing their strategy. Even if they try to claim this was all a misunderstanding or that Marcus went rogue, the recordings make their intent clear. What about Marcus? Could he be charged as an accomplice? Possibly. But if he's willing to cooperate fully and testify against your family, the prosecutor might be willing to offer him immunity in exchange for his testimony. The recordings he made and the documentation he kept actually work in his favor, suggesting that he eventually realized what was happening and tried to gather evidence. I don't want him to get immunity. Elena raised an eyebrow. Ms. Brennan, I understand you're angry with your husband, but his testimony is crucial to proving the conspiracy. Without his cooperation, your family could claim that he acted alone and that they were simply hiring him for legitimate social media services. They paid him nearly $100,000 over 3 years. That's not a legitimate fee for social media services. No, but they could argue that they didn't know how he was spending his time or what specific content he was creating. The recordings where they discuss strategy and give specific instructions are what prove they were actively directing the campaign. I struggled with the idea of Marcus escaping consequences for his role in destroying my career, but I understood Elena's logic. The bigger prize was exposing and punishing my family for orchestrating the entire conspiracy. What happens next? We file the criminal complaint this week, along with a civil lawsuit seeking damages. We'll request an emergency injunction to preserve all digital evidence and prevent your family from taking any retaliatory actions against you. And we'll prepare for a media strategy because once this becomes public, it's going to attract significant attention. Media strategy? Ms. Brennan, this is the kind of case that makes headlines. Family business conspiracy, social media fraud, identity theft involving substantial financial losses. The legal community will be interested in the precedent it sets. The business community will want to understand how to protect themselves from similar attacks. And the general public loves a story about family betrayal and justice. The idea of my personal drama becoming a media spectacle was unsettling, but I realized it might also serve my purposes. If my goal was to destroy my family's reputation the way they had destroyed mine, public exposure would be far more effective than a quiet legal settlement. How long will this take? Criminal cases can take months or even years, depending on how aggressively your family fights the charges. Civil cases often move faster, especially when the evidence is as clear as what you've presented. But I suspect your family will want to settle out of court once they realize how much evidence we have. I don't want to settle. Elena looked surprised. Ms. Brennan, settlements often provide faster resolution and guaranteed compensation. Taking this to trial is risky and expensive, even when you have a strong case. I don't care about the risk or the expense. I want them to face public consequences for what they did. I want a jury to hear exactly how they systematically destroyed my reputation for 3 years. I want their business partners and clients to know what kind of people they really are. That's certainly your right. But you should understand that a public trial means your personal life will be scrutinized as well. Your marriage, your family relationships, your professional history will all become part of the public record. I thought about Marcus sitting in our kitchen that morning, asking me to consider whether going nuclear was really the best approach. I thought about my parents, shocked faces when they realized I had discovered their conspiracy. I thought about Natalie's smirk when she'd suggested I think about who might have a grudge against me. They made it personal when they decided to destroy my career, I said. Now they get to live with the personal consequences. Elena nodded slowly. Then we'll prepare for trial. But Ms. Brennan, once we file these charges, your family is going to fight back. They'll hire expensive lawyers, they'll try to discredit you and your husband, they'll probably attempt to turn this into a story about a disgruntled employee rather than victims of fraud. Are you prepared for that battle? I've been preparing for it my whole life without knowing it. Every time they made me doubt my own competence, every time they convinced me that my failures were my own fault, every time they smiled and acted like they were trying to help me while they were actually sabotaging me. I've been their victim for 3 years. Now it's my turn. That evening, I returned home to find Marcus packing a suitcase in our bedroom. He looked up when I entered, his expression a mixture of resignation and relief. "I think it's best if I stay somewhere else for a while," he said. "Give you space to process everything and decide what you want to do about us." I watched him fold shirts and pack toiletries, feeling oddly detached from the scene. A week ago, the sight of my husband packing to leave would have devastated me. Now it felt like a logical continuation of revelations that had already shattered my understanding of our relationship. "Where will you go?" My brother offered to let me stay in his guest room. "It's just temporary, until we figure out how to move forward." "Marcus, my lawyer thinks you might be able to get immunity if you cooperate fully with the prosecution." He stopped packing and turned to face me. "What does that mean?" "It means if you testify against my family and provide all the documentation you've collected, the prosecutor might not charge you as an accomplice. And if I don't cooperate, then you'll probably face the same charges they do. Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy. Elena says you could be looking at several years in prison." Marcus sank onto the edge of the bed, the weight of his situation finally hitting him. "Chloe, I never wanted any of this to happen. When your mother first hired me, I really thought it was legitimate market research. But you knew it wasn't legitimate when you continued doing it after you realized it was me in the photos. I thought I could protect you by documenting what they were doing. I thought if I gathered enough evidence, we could expose them without destroying our own lives in the process. Our lives were already being destroyed. You were just being paid well enough not to notice." He finished packing in silence, and I helped him carry his bags to his car. As he loaded them into the trunk, he turned to me one more time. "Are you going to be okay?" "I'm going to be better than okay," I said. "I'm going to get justice." After Marcus left, I sat alone in our duplex for the first time in years. The house felt larger without his presence, but also cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted. I made myself dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and sat on our back porch watching the neighbors' chickens peck around their coop. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with texts from family members. Natalie wanting to know why I hadn't come into the office. My mother asking if I was feeling well. My father suggesting we have lunch to discuss my role in the company going forward. I hadn't responded to any of them. Let them wonder where I was and what I was thinking. Let them worry about whether I was planning something. In a few days, when Elena filed the criminal complaint and civil lawsuit, they would understand exactly what I was planning. But for tonight, I just sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of East Austin settling into evening, and thinking about the fact that my real life was about to begin. The life where I didn't have to wonder why opportunities kept disappearing. The life where I didn't have to question my own competence, or worry that my personality was somehow unsuited to the career I'd chosen. The life where I could trust my own perceptions about what was happening around me. My family had spent 3 years systematically destroying the professional identity I'd built for myself. Now I was going to build a new one, stronger and more independent than anything I'd lost. And I was going to build it on the ashes of everything they'd tried to steal from me. The first sign that my family knew something was wrong came at exactly 9:37 on a Thursday morning, 3 days after I'd hired Elena Rodriguez. I was sitting in a coffee shop on South First Street, reviewing depositions for the civil case, when my phone exploded with notifications. 15 missed calls from my mother, 12 from my father, 8 from Natalie, and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. "Chloe, we need to talk immediately. There's been a misunderstanding about some legal documents. Call me back now. This is not the way to handle family disagreements." I silenced my phone and took a sip of my cortado, savoring the moment. Elena had filed the criminal complaint with the Travis County District Attorney's Office that morning, along with emergency motions to preserve all digital evidence and freeze access to the company's social media management accounts. By now, my family had been served with notice that they were under investigation for identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The timing had been deliberate. Thursday morning meant they'd received the legal papers just as they were preparing for their weekly client strategy meeting, ensuring maximum disruption to their normal business operations. It also meant they'd have to spend the rest of the week dealing with legal panic instead of focusing on damage control. My phone rang again. This time it was Connor Hayes, our longtime business partner who ran the web development firm that often collaborated with Brennan Creative Solutions. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Chloe, what the hell is going on over there?" His voice was tense. "I just got off the phone with your mother, and she's talking about some kind of malicious prosecution and family disputes. She asked me if you'd approached me about taking legal action against the company." "Connor, I can't really discuss ongoing legal matters." "Legal matters? Chloe, we've been friends since college. What happened to talking things through before lawyers get involved?" The question stung because it revealed how successfully my family had controlled the narrative of our relationship over the years. Connor genuinely believed that family disagreements should be resolved privately, that bringing lawyers into a business dispute was somehow unseemly or disproportionate. He had no idea that my family had been paying my husband to systematically destroy my reputation for 3 years. Some things can't be talked through, Connor. Some things require accountability. Your mother mentioned something about social media accounts and misunderstandings about marketing research. She said you've gotten some bad legal advice and that this whole situation is based on a fundamental misinterpretation of a legitimate business project. I almost laughed. Less than 4 hours after being served with criminal charges, my family was already spinning the story. A legitimate business project. Marketing research. Misunderstandings. They were trying to turn a coordinated campaign of identity theft into an innocent miscommunication that had somehow spiraled out of control. Connor, did my mother explain what this legitimate business project involved? She said they hired a social media consultant to study how negative online content affects professional reputations in the marketing industry. She said they used some theoretical personas based on real people to make the research more authentic. Theoretical personas. That's what she called them. She said you'd discovered some of the test accounts and jumped to conclusions about their purpose. I felt a familiar surge of anger at my family's ability to take something unconscionable and make it sound reasonable through careful word choice. Theoretical personas instead of fake profiles. Marketing research instead of reputation destruction. Misunderstandings instead of deliberate fraud. Connor, those theoretical personas were created using my name, my photos, and my professional information. For 3 years, they posted content that made me look unprofessional and difficult to work with. They've cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost business opportunities. There was a long pause. Chloe, that's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. And I have documentation proving every aspect of the conspiracy. Maybe there's a way to resolve this without destroying your family's business. Your parents have built something incredible over 30 years. Surely there's a solution that doesn't involve criminal charges. This was the conversation I'd been dreading but knew was inevitable. The Austin business community was small and interconnected. Most of our professional relationships were also personal friendships that had developed over years of collaboration and mutual support. People like Connor had watched me grow up in the industry, had seen my family as pillars of the local marketing community, and were genuinely confused about how things had deteriorated to the point of criminal charges. Connor, I understand this is uncomfortable for you, but my family made this choice when they decided to systematically sabotage my career, instead of having an honest conversation about the future of the company. They could have told me they wanted Natalie to take over. They could have offered me a buyout or helped me transition to a different role. Instead, they hired someone to impersonate me online and destroy my professional reputation. If that's really what happened, then they made a terrible mistake. But mistakes can be corrected without destroying people's lives. They weren't correcting their mistake, Connor. They were escalating it. The fake social media activity became more damaging over time, not less. They were planning to use my supposedly deteriorating online behavior as justification to remove me from the company entirely. After Connor hung up, I sat in the coffee shop thinking about how the next few weeks were going to unfold. The Austin business community prided itself on being collaborative and supportive, but it was also insular and resistant to public conflict. People would pressure me to resolve the situation quietly, to find a way to preserve relationships and avoid the messiness of a public legal battle. But quiet resolution was exactly what my family was counting on. They knew that social pressure would work in their favor, that people would prefer to believe in misunderstandings and miscommunications, rather than acknowledge that respected community members had engaged in sophisticated fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. They're fighting the evidence preservation order. Need to meet today to prepare. I gathered my papers and headed back to Elena's office, where I found her in full battle mode. She had 2 associates working on research and a private investigator reviewing the digital evidence Marcus had provided. How bad is their response? I asked. Aggressive but predictable. They're claiming this is a family dispute that's been inappropriately criminalized. They're arguing that the social media accounts were part of a legitimate market research project, and that you've mischaracterized their purpose. And they're suggesting that your husband went beyond his authorized scope of work without their knowledge. Can they make that argument stick? Quote, not with the recordings we have. Your mother's voice is clearly audible, giving specific instructions about creating content that would damage your reputation. But they're going to try to muddy the waters and make this look like a family feud rather than a clear case of fraud. Elena pulled up a document on her computer screen. They've also hired Blackstone, Morrison, and Associates to represent them. I recognized the name. Blackstone was one of the most expensive and aggressive litigation firms in Texas, known for taking high-profile cases and winning through sheer force of resources and legal maneuvering. That's going to cost them a fortune. Which tells us they're taking this very seriously. They're not planning to settle quietly or admit any wrongdoing. They're preparing for a full-scale legal war. The idea that my family was willing to spend potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees rather than admit what they'd done was both infuriating and somehow validating. It proved that they understood the seriousness of their actions and the strength of the evidence against them. What does that mean for our strategy? It means we need to be prepared for every dirty trick in the book. They'll try to discredit you personally, they'll attack your husband's credibility, they'll claim this is about greed rather than justice. They'll probably argue that you're trying to extort money from them by threatening their reputation. Let them try. I have 3 years of documentation showing exactly what they did and why they did it. Elena's phone rang and she answered it with a sharp, "Rodriguez." I watched her expression shift from professional calm to genuine surprise. "When?" she asked. "How many outlets?" She hung up and turned to me with a look I couldn't quite interpret. That was my media consultant. The story just broke. What story? Elena pulled up the Austin Business Journal website on her computer. The headline made my stomach drop. Local marketing executive alleges family fraud in social media identity theft case. The article was detailed and damning, describing the fake social media profiles, the financial losses I'd suffered, and the conspiracy allegations against my family's company. It included quotes from the criminal complaint and civil lawsuit, along with background information about Brennan Creative Solutions and its reputation in the Austin business community. How did they get this information so quickly? Public court filings are available to journalists within hours of being submitted. Someone at the Business Journal must monitor the courts for interesting cases involving local businesses. I skimmed through the article, which was remarkably accurate, and included details I wasn't sure I wanted to see in print. The fake social media posts were described in specific detail. The estimated financial damages were reported exactly. Even the involvement of my husband as the social media manager hired by my family was mentioned. This is going to be everywhere by tonight. Elena nodded grimly. And this is just the beginning. Once the other outlets pick up the story, you're going to be dealing with reporters, social media attention, and probably some very uncomfortable conversations with people in your professional network. My phone was already starting to buzz again with notifications. Text messages from colleagues, emails from clients, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Word was spreading through the Austin business community faster than I'd anticipated. Are you ready for this level of attention? I thought about the years of self-doubt, the lost opportunities, the nights I'd spent wondering what was wrong with me, that clients kept backing out of deals and professional relationships kept turning cold. I thought about my family sitting in conference rooms discussing my supposedly deteriorating attitude while they were actively creating the evidence of that deterioration. I'm ready for the truth to come out. That evening, I attended the monthly Austin Marketing Professionals meetup at a downtown hotel, an event I'd been looking forward to for weeks before my world imploded. Under normal circumstances, I might have canceled. But I realized that hiding would only fuel speculation and give my family's narrative more credibility. The moment I walked into the reception area, conversations quieted. People turned to look at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to sympathy, to barely concealed excitement. The story had clearly spread through the professional community, and everyone wanted to see how the woman at the center of the scandal would handle herself in public. I made my way to the bar and ordered a glass of wine, hyper-aware of the whispered conversations happening around me. Some people approached me directly, offering support and expressing shock at the allegations against my family. Others kept their distance, probably uncertain about how to navigate the social dynamics of such a public conflict. Chloe! The voice belonged to Sarah Martinez, a communications director at one of the major tech companies downtown. She approached me with the kind of determined friendliness that suggested she'd made a conscious decision to show public support. I just saw the news. I had no idea you were dealing with something like this. It's been a challenging few months, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I have to say, those fake social media profiles explain a lot. I remember seeing some posts that seemed really out of character for you, but I assumed you were just having a rough patch. The comment hit me harder than I'd expected. Sarah wasn't the first person to mention noticing the fake profiles, which meant the damage to my reputation had been more widespread than I'd realized. People in my professional network had been seeing content that made me look bitter and unprofessional, and they'd assumed it was really me going through some kind of personal crisis. How many people saw those posts? I'm not sure, but they definitely made an impression. A few of us mentioned them at various networking events, wondering if you were okay, or if there was something going on with your company. I felt sick. Not only had my family succeeded in damaging my reputation, but they'd created a situation where my colleagues were discussing my supposedly deteriorating professional attitude at industry events. The fake profiles hadn't just cost me specific business opportunities, they'd turned me into a cautionary tale about maintaining professionalism online. Sarah, everything you saw was fake. None of those posts came from me. I believe you. And honestly, knowing what I know about your family's company, this whole situation makes a lot more sense now. What do you mean? Sarah glanced around to make sure we weren't being overheard, then leaned in closer. There have been rumors for a while about how Brennan Creative Solutions operates internally. Nothing specific, but people have noticed patterns. What kind of patterns? The way contracts get shuffled around between you and your sister. The way your parents seem to micromanage your client relationships, but give Natalie more independence. Some people have wondered if there was tension about succession planning or family dynamics affecting the business. The idea that industry observers had been speculating about problems at my family's company was both mortifying and somehow validating. It suggested that the issues I'd been experiencing weren't entirely invisible to outsiders, even if I hadn't recognized the true cause. Has anyone said anything specific about my work or my professionalism? Actually, that's what made the social media posts so confusing. Your work has always been solid, your client relationship seems strong, and you've never come across as bitter or difficult in person. The online persona just didn't match the person we knew professionally. As the evening continued, I had similar conversations with a dozen other marketing professionals. The consistent theme was that people had noticed the fake social media content and found it surprising given their personal interactions with me, but they'd assumed it reflected some kind of personal or professional stress I was experiencing. The fake profiles hadn't just damaged my reputation, they'd created a narrative about my character that was completely disconnected from reality. People had been making assumptions about my mental state, my job satisfaction, and my professionalism based on content that my own family had paid someone to create. By the time I left the networking event, I understood that the public exposure of my family's conspiracy wasn't just about legal justice. It was about correcting a false narrative that had been circulating through my professional community for years, affecting how colleagues viewed me, and potentially influencing business decisions I'd never even known about. The next morning's emergency hearing was standing room only, packed with reporters, legal observers, and what appeared to be half the Austin business community. Elena had warned me that the case was attracting unusual attention, but I wasn't prepared for the circus atmosphere in the courtroom. My family sat at the defendant's table with their expensive legal team, looking shell-shocked and significantly older than they had just a week earlier. My mother's usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and my father kept checking his phone as if expecting some kind of salvation to arrive via text message. Natalie sat behind them in the gallery, flanked by what I assumed were crisis management consultants or additional lawyers. She was the only one who looked angry rather than panicked, shooting occasional glares in my direction that would have intimidated me a week ago but now just seemed pathetic. Judge Rebecca Walsh called the hearing to order and immediately addressed the media presence. This is a preliminary hearing about evidence preservation, not a trial on the merits of these charges. I expect professional behavior from everyone present, and I will not hesitate to clear this courtroom if necessary. Elena stood to present our case for the emergency injunction, outlining the digital evidence that needed to be preserved, and the risk that my family might attempt to delete or alter crucial files. She presented the court with a detailed inventory of the fake social media accounts, the payment records, and the audio recordings that documented the conspiracy. Your Honor, the defendants have already demonstrated a willingness to engage in sophisticated digital deception over a period of years. Without immediate court intervention, there is substantial risk that they will attempt to destroy evidence that is crucial to both the criminal investigation and the civil lawsuit. The lead attorney for my family, a silver-haired man named Charles Blackstone, rose to object. Your Honor, these allegations are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of a legitimate market research project. My clients hired a social media consultant to study the effects of negative online content on professional reputations. The accounts in question were created as test personas, not as deliberate attempts to harm Ms. Brennan's career. Mr. Blackstone, Judge Walsh interrupted. I've reviewed the audio recordings submitted as evidence. In those recordings, your clients specifically discuss using these accounts to damage Ms. Brennan's reputation and force her to leave the family business. How do you reconcile that with your claim that this was legitimate research? Blackstone looked momentarily flustered. Your Honor, those recordings were taken out of context and may not represent the full scope of the conversations. We believe a thorough investigation will show that Ms. Brennan has mischaracterized the nature and purpose of this project. Elena stood again. Your Honor, we have 3 years of documented evidence showing a coordinated campaign to damage Ms. Brennan's professional reputation. We have payment records showing nearly $100,000 transferred to the social media consultant. We have specific instructions from the defendants about what kind of damaging content to create. This wasn't research, it was fraud. Judge Walsh studied the documents in front of her for several minutes before rendering her decision. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting the plaintiff's motion for emergency preservation of digital evidence. All social media accounts, email records, financial documents, and digital communications related to this matter are to be preserved in their current state. The defendants are prohibited from accessing, altering, or deleting any relevant materials pending resolution of this case. The ruling was a complete victory, but the real impact was the public nature of the hearing. Every major detail of the conspiracy had been discussed in open court, with reporters frantically taking notes and live tweeting key moments. By the time we left the courthouse, the story was trending on social media and being picked up by national outlets. Elena pulled me aside as we walked down the courthouse steps. Your family's legal team is going to want to meet about settlement options very soon. This kind of public exposure is exactly what they were hoping to avoid. I told you I'm not interested in settling. I understand that, but you should be prepared for them to offer substantial compensation to make this go away quietly. They're facing potential criminal charges, massive civil liability, and complete destruction of their business reputation. They'll be motivated to resolve this quickly. Let them be motivated. I want a jury to hear exactly what they did and why they did it. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call from an unknown Austin number. When I answered, a familiar voice made my stomach clench. Chloe, it's Mom. We need to talk. The conversation I'd been dreading and anticipating for days was finally happening. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mother. You should probably direct all communication through your lawyers. Please don't be like this. This whole situation has gotten out of hand, and I think there are things you don't understand about what really happened. I understand that you hired my husband to create fake social media profiles that destroyed my professional reputation for 3 years. I understand that you plan to use those profiles to justify removing me from the company. I understand that you recorded conversations discussing how to manipulate me into quitting. What exactly don't I understand? There was a long silence, and when Patricia spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. We never meant for it to go this far. You never meant to get caught. We never meant to hurt you this much. When we started the project, it was supposed to be temporary. Just long enough to help you realize that you might be happier in a different environment. The casual way she described 3 years of systematic sabotage as being for my own good was breathtaking in its narcissism. You destroyed my career to help me be happier? Chloe, you've always been so intense about the business, so focused on proving yourself worthy of taking over someday. We thought if you experienced some professional setbacks, you might naturally start considering other options. Other options like what? Like starting your own agency, or joining a different firm where you could grow without the pressure of family expectations. We thought you'd be more successful somewhere you could just be yourself, instead of trying to live up to our legacy. I was silent for a moment, processing the breathtaking audacity of her explanation. They had destroyed my reputation in the Austin business community, cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost opportunities, and made me question my own competence and professionalism, all because they thought I might be happier somewhere else. Mom, if you wanted me to leave the company, you could have just asked. You would never have agreed to that. You've been planning to take over Brennan Creative Solutions since you were in college. It's been your dream for your entire adult life, so you decided to turn it into a nightmare instead. We decided to help you find a new dream, one that didn't involve competing with your sister for something that was always going to be hers. The admission hung in the air like poison, always going to be hers. They had decided years ago that Natalie would inherit the business, and rather than having an honest conversation about succession planning, they had chosen to systematically destroy my career until I gave up and left voluntarily. How long have you been planning to give the company to Natalie? Since she joined the firm 2 years ago, it became clear that she had a better instinct for the business side of things. She understands profit margins and client retention in a way that you never have. You're creative and strategic, but Natalie thinks like an entrepreneur. And you couldn't just tell me that? We didn't want to hurt your feelings. I almost laughed. They hadn't wanted to hurt my feelings, so instead, they had spent 3 years and nearly $100,000 orchestrating an elaborate campaign to destroy my self-confidence and professional reputation. Mom, I have to go. Chloe, please, can we meet in person? Just the family, no lawyers, and try to work this out? The family? I thought about Marcus packing his suitcase, about the divorce papers I'd been considering, about the complete collapse of every relationship I'd thought I could count on. I don't have a family anymore. I have a legal case. I hung up and sat in my car outside the courthouse, watching the Austin skyline shimmer in the afternoon heat. In less than a week, I had gone from being a confused and struggling marketing executive to being the plaintiff in one of the most talked-about business fraud cases in recent Austin history. My family's empire was crumbling in real time. Local media was covering every development in the case. Their clients were quietly distancing themselves from the company. Their business partners were reconsidering long-term relationships. And I was just getting started. Elena had been right about one thing. They would try to settle soon. The public exposure was destroying everything they had built over 30 years, and the criminal charges threatened to put them in prison. But I wasn't the same person who had sat in that conference room a week ago, accepting their explanation that my deteriorating online presence was somehow my own fault. I was someone who had discovered that the people she trusted most in the world had been systematically betraying her for years. And I was someone who was finally in a position to make them pay for every day of pain they had caused. The settlement offers could wait. I wanted my day in court. 8 months later, I stood in the lobby of the newest office building in Austin's Domain District, watching my employees set up workstations in the space that would become the headquarters of Brennan Digital Strategies. The name was deliberate, a reclaiming of the family identity that my parents had tried to strip from me through years of systematic sabotage. The settlement had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, though calling it a settlement was generous. It was more accurately described as a complete capitulation. After 6 months of mounting legal fees, devastating media coverage, and an exodus of clients that left Brennan Creative Solutions hemorrhaging money, my family had agreed to terms that essentially handed me everything I'd demanded and more. $2.8 million in damages. Full ownership of the client list and intellectual property I'd developed during my tenure at the company. Rights to use the Brennan name in my own business ventures. And most satisfying of all, a public apology that would be published in the Austin Business Journal, acknowledging their fraud and accepting full responsibility for the damage they'd caused to my reputation. The criminal charges had been resolved separately. Patricia, David, and Natalie each pled guilty to reduced charges of identity theft and conspiracy, receiving 2 years of probation and substantial fines. Marcus had indeed cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for immunity, though our marriage hadn't survived the revelation of his 3-year betrayal. The divorce had been finalized a month after the criminal case ended, with Marcus keeping the duplex and me starting fresh in a downtown loft. Elena Rodriguez walked through the lobby carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the satisfied expression of an attorney who had just concluded one of the most talked-about cases of her career. Ready for the grand opening celebration? Almost. I'm still processing the fact that this is really happening. The journey from discovering the fake social media profiles to opening my own agency had been surreal. The media attention surrounding the case had generated dozens of inquiries from potential clients who wanted to work with someone who had survived such a high-profile reputation attack. Word had spread through the business community that I understood digital reputation management in a way that few other marketing professionals could claim. Dr. Sarah Chen from CloudVault Technologies had been one of the first to reach out after the initial court hearing. Chloe, I have to say, watching how you've handled this entire situation has been impressive. CloudVault is still looking for a marketing partner who really understands our business model. Would you be interested in discussing a contract? That conversation had led to a 2-year retainer worth more than I'd made in my entire final year at my family's company. Other clients had followed. Tech startups that appreciated my understanding of how online reputation could make or break a business. Established companies that wanted someone who had proven she could fight back against coordinated attacks. Nonprofit organizations that connected with my story of standing up to institutional power. Within 6 months, I had more client work than I could handle alone, which led to hiring my first employee, then my second, then deciding I needed a real office instead of working from coffee shops in my apartment. Connor Hayes appeared in the lobby, carrying a plant that was almost too large for him to manage. "Housewarming gift," he announced, setting it down near the reception desk. "Figured your new office needed something living in it." Connor had been one of the first people to apologize after the truth came out. He'd called me the day after the court hearing, clearly shaken by the realization that he'd been manipulated into questioning my credibility when I was actually the victim of an elaborate fraud. "I should have trusted my instincts," he'd said. "Your work has always been exceptional, and your character has never been in question. I let your family's reputation cloud my judgment about what was really happening." His web development firm had become one of my first strategic partnerships, and we'd already collaborated on 3 major projects that had exceeded our clients' expectations. Zara Patel, my best friend since college who worked in nonprofit communications, arrived with catering from my favorite East Austin restaurant. "I can't believe you're actually doing this," she said, surveying the office space that buzzed with productive energy. "6 months ago, you thought your career was over, and now you're launching your own agency. 6 months ago, I thought I was losing my mind. I corrected. Finding out that I wasn't crazy, that there really was a conspiracy against me, was almost as liberating as getting justice." The office space reflected everything I'd learned about building a business based on authenticity, rather than image management. Instead of the sterile corporate aesthetic that my family had favored, we'd chosen warm colors, natural materials, and an open layout that encouraged collaboration. The conference room had a view of Lady Bird Lake, and we'd installed a coffee bar where clients could relax during strategy sessions. Kelly Rodriguez, the former receptionist from Brennan Creative Solutions, had been my first hire after the settlement was finalized. She'd approached me with an offer to testify about the hostile work environment my family had created, describing years of witnessing my exclusion from important meetings and my systematic marginalization within the company. "I always wondered why they treated you differently than Natalie," she'd confided during our interview. Now I understand it was part of a deliberate plan to push you out. Kelly had brought with her insights into our former clients, needs and preferences, along with relationships that had proven invaluable in establishing credibility for the new agency. Several clients had followed her recommendation to work with me instead of continuing with my family's diminished operation. The team I'd assembled was small but carefully chosen. Jamie Chen, a recent UT graduate with a degree in digital marketing and an intuitive understanding of social media algorithms. Roberto Martinez, a graphic designer who had left a larger agency to join our more collaborative environment. Linda Thompson, a veteran project manager who had grown tired of corporate politics and wanted to work somewhere that valued transparency over hierarchy. Each team member had been hired not just for their skills, but for their alignment with the values that had emerged from my experience with systematic betrayal. Honesty over convenience, collaboration over competition, authentic relationship building over image manipulation. Elena raised her champagne glass as the team gathered in the conference room for our informal launch celebration. To Brennan Digital Strategies and to proving that integrity and talent will always triumph over fraud and manipulation. To second chances, added Connor, and to friends who stick around even when things get complicated. To new beginnings, I said, looking around at the group of people who had chosen to believe in my vision for a different kind of marketing agency. And to the power of the truth. As we toasted the official launch of my company, I reflected on how much had changed since that devastating morning in my family's conference room. The woman who had accepted their explanation that her deteriorating online presence was somehow her own fault no longer existed. She had been replaced by someone who understood that questioning your own perceptions wasn't always a sign of humility. Sometimes it was a sign that people you trusted were gaslighting you into accepting their version of reality. The financial success of the new agency was gratifying, but the personal transformation was more meaningful. I had learned to trust my instincts again, to recognize when something felt wrong instead of automatically assuming I was overreacting. I had discovered that family loyalty was supposed to be mutual, not a one-way obligation to accept mistreatment in the name of keeping peace. Most importantly, I had learned that surviving betrayal wasn't about forgetting what happened or finding a way to move past it. It was about using the experience to build something stronger and more authentic than what had been destroyed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a message that made my stomach clench briefly before I realized it no longer had the power to hurt me. Congratulations on your new business. I saw the article in the business journal. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us someday. We miss you. Love, Mom. I showed the message to Elena, who was standing nearby reviewing contracts for 2 new clients we'd signed that week. Any interest in responding? I considered it for a moment, thinking about the woman who had smiled to my face while paying my husband to destroy my career, who had sat in recorded conversations discussing how to manipulate me into giving up my dreams, who had tried to convince me that 3 years of systematic sabotage was somehow for my own good. No, I said, deleting the message. I'm done trying to understand why they did what they did or hoping they'll become different people. My energy is better spent on building something positive. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors to the office. Former colleagues who wanted to see what I'd built with the settlement money. Potential clients who had heard about our innovative approach to reputation management. Reporters following up on one of the most widely discussed business fraud cases in recent Austin history. By evening, when the celebration wound down and the team headed home to their families, I found myself alone in the office for the first time. I walked through the space slowly, taking in the details that represented everything I'd learned about creating a professional environment based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy and manipulation. The wall of client testimonials that emphasized results achieved through collaboration rather than deception. The bookshelf filled with industry resources that we shared openly rather than hoarding as competitive advantages. The project management boards that tracked deliverables and deadlines with complete transparency. Everything about Brennan Digital Strategies had been designed as the opposite of what I'd experienced at my family's company. Where they had relied on image management and behind-the-scenes manipulation, we prioritized authentic communication and honest relationship building. Where they had fostered competition and secrecy among employees, We emphasized collaboration and knowledge sharing. The approach was working better than I dared to hope. Our client retention rate was approaching 100%. Our project completion times were consistently ahead of schedule. Our employee satisfaction scores were the highest I'd ever seen in the marketing industry. More importantly, I went to sleep each night, knowing that everything we'd accomplished had been built on honest work and authentic relationships. No one was being sabotaged to create opportunities for others. No one was having their reputations secretly destroyed to serve someone else's agenda. No one was being gaslighted into accepting a narrative that contradicted their own experience. My laptop chimed with an email notification, and I glanced at the screen to see a message from Dr. Sarah Chen at CloudVault. Chloe, I wanted to let you know that the marketing campaign your team developed has exceeded our projections by 40%. More importantly, the authentic voice you've helped us develop has transformed how our customers perceive our brand. We're ready to discuss expanding our retainer for next year. I smiled, remembering the disaster of a presentation where Natalie had fumbled through my months of research because my family had decided I was too much of a reputation risk to represent the company. That contract, which had seemed so crucial at the time, had been worth $2 million. The expanded CloudVault retainer Elena was proposing would be worth $3.5 million over 2 years, not counting the referrals it was likely to generate. Sometimes the best revenge really was success built on your own terms. I gathered my things and prepared to leave the office, taking one last look at the space that represented everything I'd fought for and won. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that authentic business practices could compete with manipulation and deception. But tonight, I was going home to my downtown loft, to the life I'd built entirely on my own, to the peace that came from knowing that everyone in my world was exactly who they claimed to be. The elevator descended toward the parking garage, and I thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago, someone who questioned her own perceptions when things didn't make sense. Someone who accepted explanations that blamed her for problems she hadn't created. Someone who believed that family loyalty meant absorbing mistreatment in silence. That woman had died in the conference room where my family announced they were demoting me based on fake social media profiles they'd paid my husband to create. She'd been replaced by someone stronger, smarter, and infinitely more capable of recognizing manipulation when it appeared. As I drove through downtown Austin toward my new life, I realized that my family had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. By trying to destroy me, they had forced me to discover who I really was when everything familiar was stripped away. By betraying my trust so completely, they had taught me to trust myself instead. By attempting to erase me from their legacy, they had motivated me to build a legacy of my own. The city lights blurred past my windows as I headed home, and for the first time in years, the silence around me didn't ache with unanswered questions or self-doubt. It was the comfortable quiet of someone who knew exactly where she belonged and how she'd gotten there. Some stories end with reconciliation and forgiveness. Others end with justice and new beginnings. Mine had ended with both, and I had learned that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from mending what was broken, but from building something entirely new from the pieces that remained. The fake social media profiles that had once threatened to destroy my career were now preserved as evidence in a legal case that had made me one of the most respected marketing professionals in Austin. The family that had tried to erase my place in their business had inadvertently launched me into entrepreneurial success that exceeded anything I could have achieved under their control. The husband who had betrayed my trust for money had been replaced by a life of independence that I'd discovered I preferred. The self-doubt they'd cultivated in me for years had been replaced by confidence earned through surviving their worst efforts and emerging stronger. I parked in the garage of my building and took the elevator to the 15th floor, where my loft offered a view of the city I'd learned to navigate on my own terms. The space was mine, earned through my own work, furnished according to my own taste, filled with relationships I'd chosen, rather than inherited. As I opened a bottle of wine to celebrate the day's successes, I realized that the woman who had sat in her family's conference room 8 months ago, accepting their narrative about her deteriorating professional image, would barely recognize the person I'd become. That was exactly how it should be. Sometimes the best way to honor who you used to be is to become someone completely different, someone stronger, someone smarter, someone who understands that the most dangerous betrayals come from the people who claim to love you, and that the most powerful response to such betrayal is building a life so authentic and successful that it serves as a permanent reminder of everything they tried to steal from you. My family had wanted to write me out of their story. Instead, they had given me everything I needed to write a better story of my own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.